And so if you ever walk into CTC, you'll see in giant steel letters on our wall this formula. Visitors times conversion rate times average order value equals money. And forever we have used this formula as a method for teaching our people how to think about problem solving for a client's revenue growth. At the end of the day, we would say there are 3 variables that can contribute to revenue. You can either get more people to your website, you can convert them more often when you do, or you can get them to spend more money when they buy. And that's it. But the reality is, for the last few years, what we really have meant by that is a focus on driving more traffic. And really, when we talked about driving more traffic, what we meant was Facebook growth. And when we thought about measuring success, we really just used a metric called ROAS, which is just a function of AOV. And for a long time, this was really actually a totally sufficient way to grow revenue. ROAS was a great proxy for revenue, and ultimately even a great proxy for money in an entrepreneur's pocket, because the efficiency on Facebook was so good. But what has happened over time is a few different things. One, if we were to look at CAC or ROAS by year on this channel, so if we go, let's call it 16, 17, 18, and 19, and we were to try and find a 50th percentile outcome. So the sort of average or median, whatever sort of metric you want to use, outcome across all of our clients in terms of ROAS on the platform from these 4 years, it would look something like this. In 2016, it was about a 3.1. 2017, it was about a 2.6. 2018, something like 2.2. And then 19, somewhere right around like a 1.98 or a 2 to 1. So what that means is that over the course of 4 years, what you've seen is an average CAC or an average ROAS decline about 33%. Okay? So what that really translates to in terms of this formula is the margin ends up getting pinched. And many of these brands are continuing to grow their revenue, but what's happening is they're paying more for the customers that they're getting. Quick side note, one of the things people like to talk about is they like to talk about price, CPM. And yes, the CPM, if you compare 16 to 19, is certainly up. But here's an important note. In 2019, the CPM on Facebook was actually less than the CPM in 2018. So this, what people like to often point to as the problem of the price of the platform, is not actually the most common problem. Facebook is actually getting cheaper as an ad ecosystem. A lot of that has to do with Instagram stories, but set that aside for there. So people like to talk about it as a problem of price, but generally speaking, what it tends to be more a function of is reach. So we have this statement here at CTC, or the story that I like to tell, which is that if this is sort of your traditional customer bell curve that you learned in marketing class, the cost to acquire customers will always increase as you move out into the customer curve. And what you end up with is a slope of your cost to acquire customers. Again, we'll use CAC, customer acquisition cost, which you can always use that as a function of ROAS, is going to increase as your reach. So if this is reach on the x-axis and this is CAC on the y-axis, as you move out into the customer curve. So you have brands that began acquiring customers in 2016 at this part of the customer curve and are now moving out. So what's happening as they reach further, as their spend increases, their cost to acquire customer increases. This is often referenced by Andrew Chen, a growth marketer from Uber, as the law of shitty cohorts, which is just this idea that both your CAC and your LTV will degrade over time. So all customer acquisition metrics degrade over time, primarily relative to reach, not just in terms of platform pricing. I'll give you a specific example. So Kalo, which is the ring that I'm wearing here, I use that because we can show the product here in the video, a client of ours, has been advertising on Facebook for a long time, since about 2016. And they have reached, okay, on the platform, there are about, I'm going to use some ballpark numbers here, about 15 million married and engaged adults on the Facebook and Instagram platform that I can access in the United States. On average, Kalo has reached them with a frequency of 14 times each since 2016. So if we go and look at how many times they've advertised to their customers, they have reached all the available people. The channel is saturated much more, and the price is increasing much more as a function of their reach, more so than a function of the price of the platform. So what does that mean? How do we now take this formula and modify it to a more modern version that allows us to apply the same sort of logical problem solving, but using a different set of metrics? Well, what is very common, and a very common 2019 refrain, is to take AOV and replace it with LTV, or lifetime customer value. And people love to sort of, and this is a very trendy thing to talk about, is LTV. But we're actually going to make the argument that that isn't even actually that helpful either, because for most of us in the e-commerce space, and especially earlier stage companies in the $20 to $30 million range, we will all die waiting a lifetime to realize the value of our customer. So if you're a business that's been around for 5 years, your LTV reflects a time window that is not actually that actionable to you. So instead, what we like to do is think about this. Visitors, still critically important. Conversion rate, still critically important. And then we've come up with a metric that we call your CM, or cash multiplier. Okay? And what we mean by this is your 60-day LTV. So rather than thinking about your entire lifetime of your business, we want to know what your customer is worth in a very specific payback period. And the reason that we use 60 days is because for most businesses, that latent value capture in that short of a window will allow you to float the cash to realize it. Now, I want to be clear that 60 may not be the right number for your business, but what I will say is that regardless of your business, if you can improve your 60-day customer value, you will increase the cash that you are putting into your pocket as a business owner. So maybe your purchase cycle is a little longer, maybe it's closer to 6 months or 9 months, whatever it might be. That's the window I would look at. But as a default, if you improve your 60-day LTV, you will improve your business. So then the other thing though is that if we put all of this in parentheses, the other thing that we've learned is that this function really gives you a number that is revenue. Up here we were looking at revenue. And people were not concerned with revenue versus profit, primarily because the margin was so good that I didn't have to worry about delineating between the two. But now, as we see costs rising on the acquisition side, we now have to take into consideration what we call your variable cost. And when we say variable cost, what we mean is the total cost to get your product from the manufacturer into the hands of the customer. Everything associated with that, we would include in variable costs. So every time a customer orders a product, what are all the costs associated with getting that product to them? And we would include marketing in that. We would include your payment processor fee, your storage fee, your pick pack fee, the COGS of the product. Oftentimes this can also be referred to as contribution margin. Now there's an accounting debate to be had about whether this should include marketing costs. For our consideration, we like to include them there. So variable costs. And then the end result is we're tracking profit. So as we begin to think about the coming year and how we're going to help our clients grow, we think about taking this historical formula of just visitors, conversion rate, and average order value as a mechanism for tracking revenue. And now we want to think about the cost of visitors, the conversion rate, your 60-day LTV, your variable cost, and we want to track profit. So, and in particular, when we think about visitors, Facebook is still the star of the show. They are still the core driver of growth. And we have a whole series about why I think diversification is a siren song, and you can check that out on our blog. But Facebook's a core driver, and I would put secondarily, more and more important is search. Search, especially as brands begin to explore omni-channel distribution, really becomes the key mechanisms and places where there's real opportunity around driving traffic. And then, of course, for conversion rate, we're constantly thinking about a couple of things. One is CRO and how we improve conversion on the website with ongoing testing. The other is what we call message mapping. So, in other words, how do we think about the balance of communication between the ads on the front end and what people are experiencing on the website and on the landing pages and on PDPs, so that we're answering all of the critical questions. But these become really important. Then in regards to our cash multiplier, how do we look at things like our post-purchase flows? How do we begin to understand cohort-specific LTV data for things like customers who first purchased product A versus first purchased product B? What is their value to us, and what is the discrepancy in values between different customer types in short payback periods? This is critically important data that not many businesses have. And then other owned channels like SMS and organic social all become critically important to really improving the values of our customers once we acquire them. And then how do we begin to think about our COGS and improving? The cost of production of our products becomes critically important. How do we think about return rate? How do we look at why our products are possibly being returned? And how do we, in our message mapping, ensure that we're answering questions that may help reduce our return rate? We're going to examine supply chain, and we're going to ensure that our fulfillment fees our shipping costs aren't exorbitant. And examining every piece of this equation is going to be the thing at the end of the day that is going to drive what our customers have an insatiable appetite for in this year, and that is profit. And so as we move from a model where we were focused on revenue to a model where we are focused on profit, it becomes critically important to think about this equation. Visitors times conversion rate times your cash multiplier minus your variable cost equals profit. So for us this year, as you continue to engage with our content, you're going to get an endless supply of information that ties back to this equation and allows you to eke out every single dollar of available opportunity to put more money into your pocket. Hopefully this format was helpful. Shout out to Peter Attia for the inspiration from his content, and we thank you for tuning in to my session of Pictionary. Take care. Tell you what I had for breakfast, but I don't eat breakfast.
Oh yeah.
Aaron had 3 Carl Jr.'s breakfast sandwiches for breakfast.
Lies.
Audio check. 1, 2, 1, 2.